There's been some big name games recently that have announced support for ray tracing. One of those games is Battlefield 5, and I've shown off how good the game can look in real time using one of Nvidia's next generation RTX cards. Other big games like Metro Exodus, Tomb Raider also have the support in place, and the new Call of Duty launching later this year will allow you to use the feature too, providing you've got the right hardware. One game though that you may not have expected to see supporting RTX is, wait for it, Quake II. Bear with me for a second, I haven't gone mad, neither have you. I do absolutely mean that Quake II, the 1997 classic. Nvidia have been working on adding ray tracing support to Quake II along with a host of other changes to the game, and I think it's pretty interesting to see a 20-year-old game get an injection of graphical goodness, so I thought that I'd take a look at this. As of the 6th of June, you can head over to the Nvidia website and actually download the RTX version of Quake II and play the first 3 levels of the game absolutely free. Link is in the description below. What's more is that if you own the game, and I think that it's only around £3 on Steam, you can play the entire RTX upgraded game, including multiplayer. Before we get on to improvements though, let's just take a look at why, because let's face it, there'll be a lot of people wondering, why has someone gone to the trouble of doing this on such an old game? Well, I suppose the answer is because they can, and are more to come. Well, Nvidia have said that they're huge fans of the original game, and of course they love technology. After all, they are a big tech company, and so when an opportunity comes along to merge the two, they were all in. And what RTX in Quake II offers is a way to not only see how impressive this technology is, but also how far we've come in 20 years and how different a game can look this far down the line with some new technology spliced into the mix. Tim Willis, who is the studio director of id Software, and he was one of the creators of the original game, he was pretty excited to see what Nvidia could achieve with Quake II, and he said that they've worked with Nvidia since the early days of first-person shooters really, and it's quite impressive to see what can be achieved. So I've been playing it, recording a bit, and I wanted to show you guys. What have Nvidia done here? Well, there's a big list. First of all, they've improved the global illumination rendering. You can notice the lighting is quite different compared to the original, with the latter being very dark in some areas. The RTX version though is significantly brighter, and part of that is also down to the fact that there are different time of day options that completely change the appearance of some levels. And this, probably more than anything, really shows off the lighting systems and how dynamic it is. You might also notice that the weapon models and textures look different, and that's because they are, and they look pretty good even for an old game. In fact, all 3000 plus original game textures have been updated with a mixture of Q2XP mod pack textures and their own enhancements. There's also dynamic environments and something called better atmospheric scattering. I'm not quite sure what that is, but sounds pretty cool, I guess. And then Nvidia have also updated all of the effects with the new sprites and particle animations and all of those little lights that you might remember, such as the blinking lights, signs, switches, elevators. Well, they've all now got dynamic lighting. There's also real-time reflectivity on the player and weapon model on water and glass surfaces, as well as player model shadows, and the player model part is only for owners of the full game though. I mentioned water reflectivity, well, the water lighting has been improved as well. As if all that wasn't enough, there's also multiplayer support and a high quality screenshot mode that lets your screenshots look even better, and the game still has support for the old OpenGL renderer, meaning that you can switch between RTX off and RTX on, just in case you want to see exactly how much has changed in a given scene. All of that is pretty cool, of course, if you love the technological side of things, but what if you want to delve deeper into how all of this works? Well, Nvidia have you covered there as well, because they're making the full source code available on GitHub for anyone to download, learn from, or perhaps improve, which I think is cool, and it's an opportunity for new and upcoming developers, young programmers to tinker with things and just see what they can make. Now, they're not touching any of the expansions for Quake II, so perhaps some eager coders out there would like to take on that challenge for themselves. Could be a pretty interesting project for anyone really wanting to do some improvements for older games. What's crazy to think about now is that Quake II was actually meant to be an entirely new IP for id Software, After trying lots of things, they decided to stick with Quake II as a sequel, but they really wanted to change up the approach from the first game. And one of the reasons for this was that all of the names that they wanted to use were taken, and of course they also wanted to try and use some of the popularity of the first game to their advantage. Supposedly it was a conscious decision to change up the direction of the game, and it was a controversial one at the time within the company. They wanted to change up the direction and go with a more sci-fi story-driven experience rather than the Lovecraftian horror theme of the first game. If you think about it, Quake, maybe it did move away from that a little bit, but Doom was there to keep that genre well and truly covered. As such though, the entire premise, the enemies and the overall theme are quite different from the first game and don't actually fit into the same continuity. Skip to today and id Software no longer maintains Quake II. After all, it's a very old game, but the source code has been available for people to delve into, and that has spawned all sorts of improvements and mods over the years. And the Quake II game engine was a very popular licensed engine back in the day, and at the time it was used for games like, this is a bit of a callback here, Sin, Kingpin, Life of Crime if you remember that game, and even Soldier of Fortune, yes, which was just incredibly brutal. Half-Life was also going to use the Quake II engine, but for some reason it ended up using a heavily modified version of the Quake engine, which was also referred to as Gold Source. It was based on the Quake engine, but with a significant amount of changes that included some Quake II source code as well. And without Half-Life there wouldn't be Counter-Strike. The reality is that one of the biggest ever FPS games that so many of us played growing up wouldn't be around without Quake, so we owe this franchise a lot. Wrapping things up, Quake 2 may not be a brand new title showcasing the most incredible visuals, but this was an interesting project from a tech perspective. While the game has had a visual boost, it's of course not going to look as good as a modern day game built from the ground up, but that's not the point. The point is to showcase how much of an improvement this technology makes to the game. And it definitely shows. When you first play BF5 or let's say Metro Exodus with ray tracing enabled, it's quite impressive just seeing real-time reflections. As gamers, for the most part, we're used to having all that stuff faked, using trickery that we never really pay that much attention to. And there may be a reflection in a window, but on closer inspection, you realise it's not even behind you. But when that changes, and everything is now being reflected in real time, your immersion levels increase dramatically, especially in single player games. And according to Nvidia, ray tracing is the biggest leap in game graphics since 3D gaming took off circa 1994, which was really just a few years before Quake II released. That in itself is a bit poetic, if you think about it. Now I wanted to leave you today with some review headlines of the game from when it first released. GameSpot editor Vince Brody described the game as the only first-person shooter to render the original Quake entirely obsolete, and PC Gamer declared it the third best game ever to be released, saying ID's gun-happy masterpiece is the most sensational and subtle shooter ever, and one of the best games of any type ever created, and that is high praise indeed. Long live Quake 2. And that's all for today folks, I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't, a dislike. Subscribe for more and I'll see you in the next one.